Welcome back, everybody. I hope you all managed to find something edible to eat out there. If you did, let me know. I'd like to introduce Robbie Miller back on the stage. Robbie is a professional farrier for over 35 years. He manages a multi-farrier practice in Cape Town, South Africa. He passed his associate in 2018 and is the chief examiner in South Africa for the FITS exams. He's also examined in USA and Australia. In 2023, Robbie was the first African to be inducted into the International Horseshoeing Hall of Fame. He's represented South Africa numerous times in international and farrier blacksmith competitions, including Calgary World Championship. Robbie Miller.
Hi everybody, thanks again so much for having me. Balance has always been a contentious issue or an issue of opinions. Everybody has the idea as to what balance is and what you'd like it to be. And I thought I'd just offer a different perspective. So what we're looking at is utilizing alignment to the frog stay and the central sulcus for a repeatable and consistent perpendicular reference in both the front and hind foot. What is balance? The dictionary definition of balance is a harmonious adjustments of parts or the harmonious performance of functions. The equilibrium of forces acting on the limbs and feet both statically and dynamically. When the foot is under vertical load and there is an equal distribution of the forces being placed upon it. So, the definition of foot balance. A state that enables the equine hoof to operate or to function at its optimum. In balance, the hoof shall not cause any undue stresses to any part of the limb above it. The foot should contact the ground and load evenly. Now, I think that's the word that we're looking at, is to load evenly. Not place any undue load on any part post-landing. A state in which all of the internal structures of the foot can function correctly. So how do we define the term mediolateral? It's an anatomical term describing the sagittal division of the body into two portions, to the left and to the right. Or the term median plane can also refer to the mid-sagittal plane of structures such as the limb or digit. So, is it possible to determine accurate mediolateral hoof balance by using the central sulcus and the frog stay as an external reference to the perpendicular orientation of the coffin bone? Hoof balance, at the end of the day, is hoof balance, and our traditional mediolateral assessments is based on straight lines bisecting the hoof and the limb. We determine dorsopalmar hoof balance by utilizing external reference points that relate to structures within the foot. So shouldn't we apply the same when we're looking at or discussing mediolateral balance? Because it's still balance of the foot, isn't it? When we look at our structures, the fetlock and the pastern and coffin joints, they're all different types of hinge joints. The coffin joint, however, has got a bit of a greater, albeit limited, range of motion due to its complex nature and the associated navicular bone. But at the end of the day, they are all primarily designed to flex and extend. So you have a look at this video here. As this filly is walking forward, she's flexing and she's extending, and that is the natural function of the limb. So let's consider that the bones in the leg are all on a different axis, except for perfect rear conformation. So it makes sense that trying to trim perpendicular to a short or to a long axis would be difficult at the very least, or at the very best. Trimming to the long axis, this horse here, this is a 5-year-old thoroughbred racehorse. In fact, I'm actually going to pop to the next slide. It's the same horse. Then I'll go back again. But he's got pretty cool legs, eh? He started his career as a 2-year-old. He's 5 years old today. He has won races. He has placed numerous times, and he's never been a day unsound in his life. Now, if you have a look at his legs, trying to trim to a long axis with that angular limb deviation would be contraindicated, in my opinion. And we did discuss opinion yesterday. So what do we do? And you can have a look there. You can see what I was saying earlier about all of the different axes of the bones in the leg due to multiple limb deviations. So again, do we try to trim the horse to an axis, or do we try to trim the foot and balance the foot according to itself? So here we go with plate toe again. My opinion. Conformation is a determining factor in the flight arc and landing phase of each stride. Foot balance and the perpendicular orientation of P3 is critical to equilibrium in the stance phase. So when the limb is fully loaded and the body is coming over, that is when foot balance is absolutely crucial. You can see this horse, he tends to grow quite substantially on the medial side of the near fore. And he kind of overloads the lateral side a little bit. So we tried to trim him as perpendicular as we could to the central sulcus and to the frog stay. And that's how we manage this horse. And this is how he stays pretty sound. So using these external reference points of the frog stay and the pitch of the central sulcus, it allows for an accurate, repeatable, perpendicular assessment of the orientation of P3 of both the front and the hind foot. There's a couple of pictures, there's some really nice pictures there. You can see exactly what I'm trying to explain. These external markers are there, they're consistent, and they always seem to give a pretty accurate, repeatable reference. So we decided to get some radio-opaque wire markers and take X-rays. And we placed them on those structures, and that was what we got with radiography. As you can see, we had a nice perpendicular reference. What are we looking for? The foramina of P3 should ideally be equidistant from or parallel to the ground surface during the stance phase. You can see on that picture on the right over there with the wire marker, that's the horse with a severe mediolateral imbalance. And you can see the solar foramen, you can see that the foot is, it's a nice, easy picture because it's blatantly obvious. So here is the same horse, there's his X-ray, there is the front of his foot, and there's our farrier's view, if you will, of the extent of the mediolateral imbalance. And on that lateral side over there, we cannot trim any more foot off. The foot is really short. So Jim Ferry refers to it, I think, as low medial as opposed to high lateral. So this is the same horse. He came into, this is the same wolf that we showed on the previous slides, came into the hospital with a history of intermittent lameness. Obviously, there was a mediolateral foot balance issue, and there was no clinical reason for him to be lame, as diagnostics that the vets ran on him showed no pathologies of any type. So what we did with him was we took a squish pad and just taped it onto the foot to allow him to find some sort of equilibrium in his balance. And this little video that I'm going to play now was taken 24 hours after we put the taped the squish pad on. Unfortunately, I actually had another video that was taken a week later, and I couldn't load it up onto my program, but it's on Facebook. So that again is just an indicator of to the importance of correct mediolateral balance and associated lamenesses. So the mid-stance phase of the stride is when the foot is under the most vertical compressive load. This is when mediolateral hoof balance is critical to soundness, and this is how we keep our horses going. Note my colors there again. So this particular horse here, we're on foal watch with her at the moment. So the picture on the right is a horse that also, another racehorse that had quite a severe mediolateral imbalance. He was low medial. We needed to hoof cast him, which we did. And we took a 2-degree graduated aluminium race slate and we ground the lateral side down to create a medial lift. His racing career went from the trainers wanting to get rid of him to today where he's earned just a little over R1 million in stakes. So, good mediolateral hoof balance, equal force distribution under load, ideal joint spacing, better biomechanical function of the hoof, an improved, more even vascular supply to the foot, which will give you a more even, consistent rate of horn growth. Effects of acute mediolateral imbalance: restricted blood supply to the area under load, retarded hoof growth, capsular distortion, ligament strains, chip fractures in joints, splints, foot pain, corns and bruising. So these are I suppose, pretty severe issues that can happen to a horse. Now, when we're talking about hoof balance or imbalance, for most of us, it's negligible. But every now and again, we get it wrong and it's there. So, what do we have? Poor vascularity to the foot. The vascular supply to the foot is crucial to health and function. It's also very, very susceptible to compromise. And a restricted supply results in poor hoof growth because obviously a restricted supply, then you're not going to get nutrients to that part of the foot, and we know what happened. Poor hoof growth as a result of a poor vascular supply. You have a look at the on the medial side of this horse's foot. This horse in particular, the broodmare that came into the hospital with some serious problems. And one of the first things that we had to try to do was to bring her back into some semblance of mediolateral balance. But you can see where the arrow is. I don't know if my little, that arrow over there, or it worked. But you can see the growth rings and the compression rings on the hoof wall. Physically looking at the foot, it was very, very bad. They were going to put her down. This particular mare was in foal to a very extensive, she had a very extensive foal inside her. And the plan was that we were going to get the foal out and then they were going to put the mare down. We ended up ultimately having another 4 seasons with her. So there's a whole story attached to that as well. Okay, so capsular distortion. When you have a mediolateral imbalance, what's going to happen? You're going to have excessive loading on one side and no loading on the other side. So you'll have a hoof imbalance, the hoof wall becomes distorted, and possible lameness. Collateral ligament desmitis, that we've had to deal with at the hospital quite a bit. I think those pictures over there explain it nice and quickly. Unequal joint spacing. Mediolateral imbalance can lead to unequal joint spacing, causing compressive injuries and possible collateral ligament injuries. So if you have a look at that, Dr. Parks actually took a wedge and he stuck it on the one side of the foot and then re-x-rayed the horse, and that was what he found. So radiography, we've seen quite a few radiographs over the last couple of days that all of the speakers have posted up on their presentations. How important are good radiographs when it comes to evaluating feet? I think it's absolutely paramount. I'm very lucky where I live. The vets that we work with are very good, and we 99% of the time get really, really good x-rays, which makes it easy to discuss, to formulate a plan and to go on. When you don't have good x-rays, it does make it significantly more difficult to work out what you're going to do. In the racing world, we get what we call medial heel pain quite often. And what it is pretty much compression of the medial palmar process into the theta corn area. And of course, this can go very lame. Flat-footed horses, low medial, and not only can that be the difference between winning a race or not, it can be the difference between getting into a race or not, or having to be scratched. So here's another picture of a little medial lift application that we did with the horse that had a medial heel pain. And we took a normal race plate, ground the lateral thigh down to create a medial lift shoe. This horse went on to run in his race and subsequently win. So, typical hoof wall compression lines that with constant overloading. You can see them quite obviously, and what we've got on the next slide is the same horse over a period of shoeing cycles, probably scant or spanning about 9 or 10 months. And medial lift applications because we couldn't trim the foot into a mediolateral balance. So we had to mechanically apply it. And the horse is now being sound for probably another 9 or 10 months. And he's competing again, and he's doing pretty well. Here we have a Grand Prix dressage horse. He's not a young horse anymore. He's probably about 17. He's a warm blood, multiple limb deviations. You can see the rotational, the phalangeal rotation just from the fetlock into the pastern. And just recently, before I took these photos, or we took the photos and the x-rays, he just scored his highest test mark of 70%. So we put him on the hoof feet gait analysis system just before and after. You can see the time frames there. And about a little under 2 hours. It didn't take me that long just to do 1 foot, by the way. We actually got the whole horse done. So you can see as we run it, you'll see how from left to right, the before and the after, how we change just on using our principles of mediolateral balance. This horse is sound and he's doing very, very well. I'll try and run it again. If you can see how the load shifts from the laying phase to the stance phase. And then interestingly, pointer breakover is still the same, which I did find quite interesting. I'm going to try and go back again and see if we can run that again. I'm not an expert on the hoof beat system by any means, but for me it made pretty clear sense to me that we kind of shifted our load to where we wanted it. I think whoever's used to and knows the hoof beat system will be able to interpret it a little bit better than I can. There, in fact, right there, you can see where he's loaded. Earlier on, he was loaded on the medial heel, and we shifted it across more to a lateral heel type. So there we have our landing phase. You can see where he landed. Before the shoeing, he landed on the lateral side of the foot. And then after the shoeing, he was landing a little bit more lateral heel. That is a little bit more of an upright foot as well. And there's our mid-stance, where initially you could see it was all across the medial side of the foot. And then post-shoeing, it had shifted across. So, what about the hind feet? It's impossible to evaluate to a long or a short axis simply because of the reciprocal apparatus in the hind feet. But however, the orientation of P3 is still relative to the frog position, and the hind foot still has a load phase to each stride. So the same basic principle applies to foot balance. I still, every now and again, when I lift up a hind foot, I tend to sort of try and hang my eyeball over the hock so I can see if I have the foot balance, but it doesn't make any difference because the reciprocal apparatus will have changed that position of the foot anyway. My missus and I went up to Kruger Park a year ago, and there was a herd of zebra that walked across the road. And it was just by chance that I was going through some pictures and I saw this, and you can almost see the back of that zebra feet, the same indicators. So it's the same. And I didn't trim that. I know I'm a racing fan, it's a really flat feet. But yeah, so the same principle. It's quite interesting in that once you start to see it, you struggle to kind of unsee it. In clothing, it was quick. Even though we can make and fit any shoe or shoeing package, it's most efficient and functional when applied to a well-balanced foot. So we can put anything on a horse's feet, but if the foot's out of balance, the load forces are still not going to be correct, and sometimes your fancy package that you're sticking on the horse is not going to help you. Thank you. That's me.
Thank you, Robbie. We've got some questions for Robbie. And Charlie.
Do you find the collateral ligaments get injured more from stretching or compression?
More from stretching. Yeah.
That was easy, wasn't it?
Was my answer too short?
Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Anyone else got anything?
I suppose you've got to take into account ground reaction force. I mean, that is as much a staple of what we do as farriers as it is trimming feet and fitting shoes. The effects of what we do on the ground, and by default the return effect. So when you are trimming and balancing feet, you want to have that when they under load as consistent as possible, because any little bit of excess leverage from one side to the other could cause possible injuries like suspensory collateral ligament issues and so on, joint tips, all sorts of things.
Thank you, Robbie. That was really good, really interesting. This little device for your balance looked really good. You had the picture of the Grand Prix horse, which had the fetlock valgus, but then the rotation of the hoof capsule. Did you still use these with that rotational deviation?
So when we started with that horse, he had been intermittently lame and sound and wasn't really performing well. And when we started using this as a reference, he improved, and he's just gone from strength to strength. So it's nothing to do with what the vet did.
Do you find the use of T-squares are going to be redundant then would you never use a T-square down the long axis?
It doesn't make any sense. You know, if you've got an angular deviation in the limb or a rotational deviation in the limb, it's null and void. You know, do you trim proximal or distal to a deviation in the limb. I once asked somebody that, and he asked me, what color is the horse?
With the racehorses we have coming into the MRI, you could often see the side they were landing. They often had then condylar fractures and fissures in the fetlock right on that side, even before they're properly lame. They're just not, but it was always the side they were landing. Did you see the same, like where they were hitting the ground first?
I don't know whether, I haven't really sort of had a look at that. And yeah, vet side, that, you know, they're limited in what they tell us, don't they? So I can't answer that, no.
Right, I think we need to give Robbie a round of applause. Thank you.